It's 30 or so years from now, and you're standing on the side of the highway. What do you see? We can be pretty certain that rushing by, there will still be cars, and there will still be trucks filling that road. But across the highway, down an off-ramp that loops around and tucks into the parking lot of what used to be a gas station, you see a big sign that reads, hydrogen fuel. Because those trucks, the big heavy-duty 18-wheelers blazing past, sure they have electric motors, and sure they have batteries powering those motors, but the electric energy stored in those batteries and powering those motors doesn't necessarily come from wind, or solar, or any other fuel source that we think of when we think of sustainable energy. It comes from hydrogen, for sale right across the highway. Today, we're talking with David Layzell about efficiently unlocking the power hidden inside the most abundant element in the universe, hydrogen, on this episode of Carbon Copy. So, first of all, most simply, tell us, what is hydrogen?
It's two things. It's both an element and it's a gas. As you can have, as an element, it's the most common prolific element in the universe. When a hydrogen is attached to another hydrogen, you get H2 gas. So there's H2. The two means there's two hydrogens attached to one another. And it's a very energy-rich gas molecule.
Why do we care about hydrogen?
Well, hydrogen is a molecule that has a lot of energy in it, the hydrogen gas, and when we extract that energy, we get formed as the end product of it is water, and so it's essentially considered a zero emission energy source, and it could be one of the opportunities we could look at for driving a new low carbon economy, because the hydrogen doesn't contain any carbon in it, but it does contain a lot of energy.
Tell me, how is hydrogen made?
Well, hydrogen, there's a number of different ways of making it. The way 95 to 98% of all the hydrogen made on the planet today is made usually from natural gas through a process known as steam methane reforming. And this is where you take methane, which is a CH4 molecule. It's the main constituent of natural gas. And you also combine it with steam at high temperatures over a catalyst, and you create carbon dioxide and hydrogen. The amount of hydrogen you create is a considerable amount of the energy in the original natural gas stream ends up in the hydrogen stream, and you get a carbon dioxide product, which can either be released to the atmosphere the way it is for most industrial plants today, or it can be sequestered or made into enhanced oil recovery, used for other uses for carbon dioxide.
So I wasn't going to ask this question, but I think I want to jump in and ask anyway, because I think a lot of people will be interested. If you think back many, many decades ago, if you talk about using hydrogen for transportation or for other applications, I'm sure some people will think about the Hindenburg disaster. Is hydrogen safe?
It certainly can be safe. And actually, it's interesting. If you go back to the Hindenburg disaster, it was actually the coating on the outside of it wasn't the hydrogen that caught fire and blew up. It was the shell on the outside of it was made of very flammable materials. And yes, and people do think about the Hindenburg disaster, and the reality is that a lot has progressed in the last 100 years, and I think the one of the things we need to develop, as we look seriously at a hydrogen economy, is to make sure that we are developing the safety. We have a lot of the safety methodologies already defined, but make sure that they're deployed appropriately. I mean, if you think about now, if gasoline or diesel were to be introduced today, these are highly flammable liquids. The concept of actually going to a gas station to fill up your car and pulling a a hose off a pump, and if you squeeze that pump, very explosive liquids flows out. That would never be approved today if these were technologies that were just being introduced now. The fact it was introduced 100 years ago, and we've learned how to safely work in most cases with gasoline and diesel at the pumps. In a hydrogen fueling system, it's in many ways much safer than our current gasoline and diesel refueling system. You end up having a valve that you snap into a container on your vehicle, and you flip a valve across to lock it in, so there's no way the gas can escape into the atmosphere, and then you turn the gas on, and it will flow to refuel your vehicle. In some ways, it's much safer than our existing system with gasoline or diesel. The technology is much more sophisticated.
Yeah, that's a really important point. So the bottom line is that hydrogen is abundant and it's safe.
It's abundant, and it certainly it can be made safe, or is safe in its way it's being developed now. And I think we're going to be constantly learning if we move in this direction. The most important thing I would say about hydrogen is that it's as a fuel for society. It is a fuel which its production, combustion, and use can have a very low environmental footprint, and also be made very cost effectively. What we need to do is take the learnings from the oil and gas industry in the past 100 years, and this is an industry which is incredibly efficient in converting what it pulls out of the Mother Earth as oil and natural gas, and converting it into the fuels that we use to drive our economy today. The oil and gas industry has wrung the any inefficiencies out of that system to a very impressive extent. And if that same sort of ingenuity were to be applied to taking and producing and distributing hydrogen, I think we have a pretty, a credible alternative to our carbon-based economy of today. It still may have a significant reliance on fossil fuels, but it's a matter of taking the energy out of the fossil fuels as hydrogen and leaving the carbon back in the earth from where it is now.
Yeah. So I'd love to dig deeper on that. And in scientific circles, there's a lot of buzz about the hydrogen economy of the future. Can you paint me a picture of what that looks like?
I think the hydrogen economy is probably going to start, I would argue, with replacing some of the fuels that are valued more highly. We pay, on a dollars per gigajoule basis. We pay the least amount for industrial heat. Home heating, we pay a little bit more. For electricity, we pay even more. We pay someday, if you're paying 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour, that's about $15 a gigajoule. So we pay, between $15 to $20 to $25 a gigajoule. For transportation fuels, we're willing to pay more for those, or do pay more for those, things like gasoline and diesel. Those are the ones that I think it's possible to start the hydrogen economy on by targeting those fuels, because we're willing to pay more for it. We have a technology that for a hydrogen economy, instead of, most of our fossil fuels, we get the energy out of them by either just combusting them be it heat, or we put them through an internal combustion engine. Hydrogen, you could burn hydrogen in an internal combustion engine or in jet engines, but in fact you get much better value for money by putting it through a fuel cell. And in a fuel cell, you generate electricity directly from the hydrogen. You put the hydrogen in one side of the fuel cell, you put some oxygen in from air, and what you get out is water vapor or water and electricity. The electricity can then drive electric motors. It can, move vehicles, etc. It could be stored in batteries for temporary storage, and then pulled back from the batteries. So one of the values, of new hydrogen economy is that we can target the fuels or the energy sources that we place the most value on today, the transportation fuels that we're willing to pay the most for.
You talked about hydrogen fuel cells, and I want to probe on that. I don't mean to sound like a skeptic, but there was a lot of interest in hydrogen fuel cell technology a handful of decades ago, and it doesn't appear to have really gone where it was foreseen to go. For example, I had a fantastic chemistry teacher in high school that had me convinced that by 2020, hydrogen fuel cells would be absolutely everywhere. Can you tell me why hasn't this happened?
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, there was a lot of excitement about hydrogen about 40 years ago, and again about 15 or 20 years ago. And I don't think the time was quite right for it then. Things have changed a bit. One of the things that's changed is incredible advances in battery technology and in electrification of our transportation systems. There's been an explosion of interest in the movement to electric vehicles, and that has brought down both the cost of certainly the cost of battery storage. There's also been a very dramatic decline in renewable wind and solar power. Is now the least expensive for generation of electricity, less expensive than, say, single cycle or combined cycle gas turbine technologies, is the production of wind and solar, and that whole field has matured dramatically. And one of the things that it used to be thought that hydrogen fuel cell technologies were really a competition to electrification and batteries. I certainly don't see it that way, and I don't think most of the sectors see it that way. It's really actually almost it's a complement to electrification of personal mobility. For example, one of the advantages, of a hydrogen vehicles is they're kind of a range extender. They can, if you have an electric vehicle but you really want to drive the electric vehicle for many long hours, you're driving, say, from Calgary to Vancouver, and you don't want to be stopping and to recharge for many hours on the way, you might want to have a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, which will give you that range extension, and you can get very long distances. You still have a battery supply on board. You have batteries on board, but you also have through the hydrogen fuel cells, a ability to produce the electricity that can charge the batteries and also go directly to the wheels. And so what you have then is, if the vehicle is needing to climb a mountain or to accelerate very quickly, the computer on the vehicle will draw electricity from both the fuel cells and from the batteries. And then at times when you're maybe going downhill and you want to slow up and control your speed, it will use regenerative braking that will recharge the batteries, and you'll be able to recharge the batteries that will give you more power. So the hydrogen fuel cell is a range extender. It's also really important to see it as a capacity extender, a energy extender. For example, battery trucks are a hard sell because the weight of the batteries you need in order to provide enough energy to drive a heavy vehicle, for example, 40-ton or 60-ton vehicle, the battery, you don't have enough weight you don't want to use that weight to store all your electricity, and you also want to be able to have a truck that can go 500 or 1,000, even 1,500 kilometers without having to refuel. Essentially, which some of the diesel vehicles today have really long ranges because they're doing very long trips, and it costs money to stop and refuel all the time. So in an electric vehicle, the refueling time's longer, and so having electric trucks it really doesn't make a lot of sense for a low carbon alternative. A hydrogen electric hybrid truck opens up a a new opportunity. You get the huge advantages of electric motors for their ability to provide torque and to provide power. Almost, a huge power that they can provide over when it's needed to start up quickly if you're pulling a heavy load or carry a load over a steep grade. But at the same time, you want to be able to, you don't want the greenhouse gas emissions, so you need a non-carbon-based fuel. Hydrogen fuel cells on those vehicles can be scaled to provide that torque and electricity when it's needed, but it also is going to fill batteries, and the combination of the battery and the electric fuel cell can actually give this truck the energy it needs to, in our calculation and estimates, to outperform a diesel vehicle of today. So I think that's a really attractive to the trucking industry as well.
Every 2 years, ERA hosts Spark, a conference that brings together the world's best clean technology innovators and investors under one roof to discover how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, attract investment, and build a more diverse, lower carbon economy in Alberta. Spark 2019 takes place October 28th to 30th in Edmonton, Alberta. To learn more, visit eralberta.ca. If you'll humor me for a bit, if you're standing on the side of the road in the year 2050, what do you see in terms of the transportation system?
I certainly see that it's going to look very different than it does today. And I think even significantly before 2050, but go out to 2050. Certainly vehicle autonomy. There's computers can drive more safely than humans. They don't go and play on their cell phones and do the other things or fall asleep while driving, one hopes. And so there should be able to autonomous connected vehicles, I think, are going to play a much more important role, certainly in the personal mobility area. And once you get autonomous connected vehicles, the potential to make them shared, where you can have right sizing of vehicles when you're wanting to take a trip that is, a short trip for only by yourself in a vehicle, which is most of our trips are with single persons in the vehicle. You would have a very small car come and pick you up and take you. You don't need to have a 7 passenger SUV to drive individually in most of our trips. When we buy a car today, we tend to buy a vehicle. This vehicle is purchased for the 1% of the trips that we actually do. I'm going to go on a holiday and I'm going to be pulling a trailer and I'm going to be doing this. So we buy a vehicle that do that and we use it for 99% of the trips. And there's a lot of inefficiency in that, both because the fact that we use a car today only about 4 to 5% of the time, 95% of the time it's parked on incredibly expensive land. On the freight side, it's a very different situation. Today, there's a lot of challenges and strains within freight transportation. Certainly, there's concerns in the freight sector about greenhouse gas emissions, about air pollution from diesel vehicles. There is the Volkswagen fiasco of a few years ago where, the clean diesel was shown to be a misnomer, to say the least, and basically they were cheating on the tests. And since that time, there's been many cities and many countries and regions of the world that have basically announced bans on internal combustion engine or diesel engines, by some of them as soon as 2025, some of them by 2030, and some by 2040. So that sector is very much looking for alternative fuels that are low emission, low air pollution. But this sector also has other problems. They also have a very severe driver shortage. They can't get younger drivers. The average age for truck drivers in many provinces of Canada is 47 to 57 years old or older. This is a sector that is concerned about staffing and trucks. The other problem with this sector is that these vehicles they use There's a lot of money tied up in a freight vehicle, but because of both driver shortage and because of the drivers can only drive for so many hours a day, these vehicles are often not used more than 10 to 12 hours a day, if that. And so there's a lot of assets that sit around parking. And I think in the world of the future, there's many analysts who have been looking at the heavy freight trucks becoming autonomous, be able to platoon, essentially follow very closely behind one another, being computer controlled, and reducing pretty dramatically the cost of freight movement on our highways by being able to move much more efficiently, and so in that kind of a world as well, we're not talking about them driving big trucks driving on city streets. We're talking on the major highways connecting cities, that the autonomous trucks will be running on those roads. And we see that as the opportunity also for hydrogen fuel cell transportation. You could certainly see, hydrogen fuel cells running in cities, but the long distance movements where the fuel use is so high, where they need lots of capacity, where you've got they need the torque to be able to move very heavy loads, and you need a fuel supply that is going to be able to take you hundreds or even 1,000 kilometers or more before refueling. And then when you do refuel, you want to refuel very quickly. So those are the kind of vision for the future in freight transportation is probably more vehicle autonomy. Certainly not, you still be drivers, but the drivers there may be fewer drivers on a train of vehicles in 10 to 15 years from now. You might only have a driver on the first truck, and there might be 5 trucks that are platooning in long distance movements, say between Regina and Calgary, or et cetera, across the major highways. And those are the spots where we see cost reductions as well as major reductions in the environmental footprint from those vehicles.
In this vision that you're describing for 2050 or 2040 or 2030 for that matter, what do you see as the role of liquid fuels like gasoline and diesel in this future?
We are seeing already a significant exponential rise each year in the amount of electrification of our transportation system. It's not that we're going to be moving less in 30 years from now. I can virtually guarantee there'll be more demand for transportation than there is today. The question is that, I would argue that the real question we should be asking from Alberta is not, about gasoline and diesel demand. It's where is the transportation fuels go? We consider in Alberta, we're in the oil business in Alberta. I would say we're in the transportation fuel business. When something like 77 to 80% of all of Alberta oil ultimately is converted into transportation fuels, gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. And the demand, the market for those fuels is dramatically changing. There is a large interest, and it's not going to change tomorrow, but it's going to be changing in the next 20 years. That means really a new market is opening up. It's not because we're going to have less transportation. It's just that there are going to be new fuels for transportation. We see Alberta has a very large opportunity to become a world leader in the production of some of these new fuels. Hydrogen, I think, is the foundational fuel here. It could have a slightly different forms in the future. It could be ammonia. It could have different forms of hydrogen in terms of whether it's cryogenic or compressed, etc. And I think that, I think the issue really is how do we use the resources we're blessed with in this province to provide the transportation fuels of the future, not stop producing gasoline and diesel. As long as there's a demand, I think we should be producing them. But as the demand shifts, we want to be there to take up this new opportunity for a new market for zero emission transportation fuels, which clearly is where the world needs to go. And Alberta has a chance to take a leadership role in that.
So again, there's a lot of different directions I want to take this conversation. I will get back to the broader hydrogen economy, but I've got maybe one or two more questions specifically about the transportation aspect before sort of take it up to the higher level again. So I understand that you're involved in a project being co-funded by ERA that's led by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Can you tell me about this project? What is the objective of the project and what will it accomplish?
It's a very exciting project. It's called AZTEC, Alberta Zero Emission Truck Electrification Collaboration. And this involves at the very core is two trucking companies, the Bison Transport and Trimac Transport. These are major carriers of goods on Alberta roads, and actually not only Alberta roads. These are both companies that operate across North America, United States and Canada. The Trimac head office is actually in Alberta, and Bison, I believe, is in Toronto, but check me on that. But these companies are interested in exploring electrification of heavy transport. They have a strong interest in finding lower emissions, both from air pollution and from greenhouse gas emissions. And they also are interested in the power and the additional benefits that electric drivetrain can provide them in terms of torque. And of course, they want ability to have they want the benefits of electric drivetrain, but also benefits of rapid refueling times and reliability, low maintenance cost, which they see as an opportunity from hydrogen fuel cell vehicles.
Well, that's fantastic. So it appears that hydrogen is particularly well suited to heavy-duty freight transportation. Is that a fair assessment? I
think it's one of the only options we have if we want to dramatically reduce over the coming decades the greenhouse gas emissions from freight transportation. We need to move to a low-carbon economy. We have a credible opportunity in the province that, perhaps initially in addition to and eventually as an alternative to, is sending really low, at low prices, at discounted prices. We're sending oil and natural gas out to other jurisdictions, mostly to the United States. We send our natural gas there at about $2 a gigajoule if we're lucky. We send our oil, crude oil, at about $8 a gigajoule, maybe $8, $9, $10 a gigajoule in that price range. Again, if we're lucky. Sometimes we're not so lucky, we sell it for a lot less. If we took those same resources, the oil and the natural gas, and we instead made it into hydrogen in the province, we left the carbon in the ground, we can then send that energy into other jurisdictions. We figure in the range of 20 to 25, even $30 a gigajoule, and there's still, so we get a lot more economic value retained within the province. Our calculations are somewhere between 3 to 10 times more economic activity by being in the zero emission transportation fuel business than in the export of crude oil and natural gas to other jurisdictions for making into transportation fuels. And so we see an opportunity there, a significant economic opportunity for the province. Initially we see it as supplemental and extending, giving us new products, but eventually our vision in CSER and in the Transition Accelerator is the hydrogen fuels, if we're successful, will be a more economically viable and environmentally sustainable alternative to our existing transportation fuel supply system.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've you've shared with us some thoughts around the role that Alberta can play in the hydrogen economy. And if I may be so bold as to summarize it in one sentence, I would say that the hydrogen economy represents a strong opportunity for Alberta to build on our strengths and continue to thrive as a province while the world moves to a low-carbon future. Is that accurate?
That is totally accurate. In fact, I think the world we've seen many disruptive technologies and forces impacting sectors, many sectors. We can think of the movies and the books and the retail sector have all been dramatically impacted the last 20 to 30 years. Those same forces, those, digital technologies, artificial intelligence, computers, computer technology, big data, those same forces have turned their focus on transportation. Alberta is very much in the transportation fuel business. There's that whole business is at the cusp of a major change. We are being hit by a tsunami, if you like, of sorts, even though we're not on the ocean. But we want to make sure we can ride the wave, right, rather than being washed out to sea. So I think that the way I look at it is this is a very exciting opportunity for the province. We have the resources that we need, continue to be in the transportation fuel business in 30 to 40 and 50 years from now, and we need to be thinking and developing these technologies and the companies and the use of these new transportation zero emission fuels now, and that will be a major economic driver for this province, I would predict in the coming decades.
Thanks for listening to Carbon Copy. Rate and subscribe on your podcast app of choice. And for more information on the work ERA is doing, visit eralberta.ca. Until next time, this is Carbon Copy, and I'm Mark Summers.